YouTube's still launching. Okay. All right. Just started the broadcast.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Bonnie Watson with the Telluride Foundation. Welcome to the Western Slope Business Resource Call. We're incredibly excited to have you here today. Just quickly, you'll probably notice that the name has changed on our call, so I want to explain that real quick. So the Northwest and Southwest regions of Colorado have joined forces to create the West Slope Business Resource Call every Wednesday at 1 p.m. So we're moving away from the Friday calls to Wednesday. And really the intent with that was that we identified that as we're moving out of some of the crisis management, we can move a little bit further and be more forward looking. And as we were coming into the summer months, we decided that for everybody's time and resources that it makes more sense to have a West and an East Slope call. So welcome, it's all the same people, all the same sponsors. We're just joining forces into a Western and Eastern call now. So we're super happy to have you here. Next slide, please. Great, thanks, Emily. So a big thanks to all of our partners. All of the logos and individuals you see here all go into these calls every single week, and it would be possible without all of these individuals working diligently and so hard on these calls. So we can't thank them enough. And next slide, please. So today, you know, as we go through these weeks and as our team is working and we're deciding, you know, what is the most relevant conversation that we could be having, we really wanted to focus on the main street of our, you know, communities in rural and all over. And so the question today is, what is the future of Main Street? And so Main Street's an intersection of so many important things in our communities: art, culture, small business, and it really gives our communities an identity. And so that's left a lot of challenges and left a lot of main streets in crisis. And so today's panels, we're going to discuss, what does that look like? What does the future of Main Street look like? And maybe how can we leverage this pandemic as a window into the future for our main streets and our small businesses? And so we have two panels today. So we're going to go macro. We're going to have a panel for about 30 minutes with national panelists who are watching across the nation what is going on. And then we're going to come into a more micro view about our local Main Street. And that panel will be fully focused on our local Main Streets here in Colorado. So we're super excited to hear from everyone today. This call is going to be 60 minutes long. It'll end at 2 o'clock. And I am going to pass it over to Delaney to moderate our first panel. Delaney.
Hello, everyone. This is Delaney Keating, Managing Director of Startup Colorado, coming to you from Gunnison, Colorado here today. I'm excited to moderate this panel with the wonderful group of people joining us. This is a robust panel today. So for my intro and framing of the conversation, I will be speaking quickly but dynamically. Take a deep breath and follow with me. I want to give a special thanks to the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, Colorado Main Street Program, and Downtown Colorado, Inc. for extra support in developing today's topic. You can learn more about the resources these organizations offer at the end of the call. But also today, as we dig into Main Street, something we all care about, something to be clear on is we're going to hear the words Main Street about 1,000 times. And main streets are built environments loaded with infrastructure, zoning, and codes. So we think of them with a lot of permanence. But Main Street is fundamentally an idea, one we all agree is important. So I'm going to ask you to join me on a little exercise. And because this is a Zoom call and I can't read the room, you don't get a say, and you get to go with me on a short exercise to allow us to become Main Street explorers, especially during a time when some of our fears and tensions are running high. To free our minds a bit and detach from our emotions and establish notions of Main Street, we're going to say the words Main Street backwards. If you say the word Main Street backwards, it is Neum Terts. It feels awkward and maybe you're laughing, but it's a good moment to remember that even as adults, we can come to things with a bit of playfulness and find a new angle. So Main Street backwards is Neum Terts, and that creates two new words begging to be defined. So today, let's explore Main Street together in the spirit of Neum Terts for the next hour. On a more serious note, as we dig into our conversation, pre-COVID, and even more so today, we teeter on the potential for businesses to be a force of good in solving societal issues that philanthropy alone can't address. Impact investing, social enterprise, and the creative economy are several ways that we seek to bring business and philanthropy together. The root of a lot of these issues are the results of human nature, and we can't separate the people from the place. So this is where Main Street comes in. We may casually think of Main Street as our downtown or central business district, when in fact it is much more, especially in small rural communities. Main Street is the intersection of business, art, and culture, and in many ways, it becomes the center of our towns. The dynamics and sustainability of it have been challenged for decades, and given our fears for Main Street and small business today, we seek to tune in to learn more about how this pandemic may offer us a window of possibility. Joining us today from our national focus, thought leaders, and service agents across the country, we have Kathy LaPlante, Brian Corrigan, and Phil Kirshman. Now, they probably won't talk about Neum Terts, but they will talk about Main Street. Kathy LaPlante joins us. She is a Senior Program Officer and Director of Coordinating Program Services at the National Main Street Center, with expertise in building organizational capacity and developing programming and promotions. She has worked in the Main Street field for 25 years and joined the staff at the National Main Street Center in 2007. She works throughout the US, providing trainings for cities of all sizes, using the Main Street approach to downtown revitalization. We also are joined by Brian Corrigan. Brian is a creative placemaking artist, designer, entrepreneur, working at the intersection of creative economy, technology, and community development. His socially engaged practice spans rural, urban, and suburban communities and is focused on sparking and supporting the development of healthy, inclusive, and vibrant places for all people. And finally, we have Phil Kirshman. Phil is joining us as the founder of Impact Metropolis, a social network and video hosting site dedicated to the sustainable and impact investing community. Previously, Phil was Chief Investment Officer at Cornerstone Capital Group. Phil serves on the board and on the executive committee of Calvert Impact Capital, and he recently served on the board and executive committee of USSIF, the Forum for Sustainable and Responsible Investment. So welcome, panelists, and thank you so much for your time and joining us today. It was a pleasure to talk to you in advance as we teed up this conversation. As we first tune in, let's take a quick look back. And Kathy, if you could share with us, historically speaking, why and how our main streets have re-evolved really post-1980 to become an essential part of community.
Yeah, you know, our downtowns or our, what'd you say, Neum Terts. I like that phrase. I also need to update my bio because I hit 30 years working in Main Street this past year. But our main streets have really been that essential heart and soul of our communities forever. You know, from some of our oldest downtowns out here in New Hampshire are from the 1600s. It's where the blacksmiths, the dry goods stores opened, and they continued. They were successful then because we were very smart in how we laid out our cities, and because of transportation, everything had to be walkable or easily gotten to by horse and buggy. And then a lot changed for our main streets throughout the years. They didn't become as walkable as housing moved further out, as transportation took people further away. But they were built to make the highest and best use of the property in the center of our communities. The buildings are built side by side. It made for efficient use. It made for efficient travel for people. Main Street also is where most every community finds its most iconic buildings. You just don't see the kinds of buildings that exist in our downtowns now being built anymore when you see the things that happen out on the Strip. And downtown is just traditionally the place where we celebrate as a community. I often like to say that, where do you hold a parade? It has to happen on Main Street because that's what it's set up to be. It's set up to be the heart and soul of our community. It's where most of our independent local businesses are owned. It's where our entrepreneurs can grow more easily because rents have been more affordable in recent years for our communities as well. But, again, it goes back to this is where our history is. This is where our founding fathers in each of our communities established the city. And so it's that celebration that we try to continue to promote and draw people back to. And I think even today, the thing that draws most people back to our downtowns is still that walkability factor. And that's the place where we're going to find our local independent businesses more so than any place else in the community.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks, Kathy. And so everyone knows,
Sure.
Kathy actually has extensive history and experience here in Colorado, which was incredible to learn. So don't be afraid to bring that forth in your comments today. Something I'd like to start to explore with all of you is that really over the last several decades, as new retail models have been developed, it hit Main Streets hard. We all know, despite significant investments in time and money to ignite or reignite that vibrancy, we see a pattern of varied results across the country. So let's start off with you, Brian, and everybody consider and start to weigh in. But what examples have you seen pre-COVID or even today that stand out as successful in Main Street revitalization?
Yeah, well, I think pre-COVID, there was really kind of this retail apocalypse that people were saying was happening. And, it was kind of fueled by the idea that Amazon was taking over. And so with that, I think the benefit of Main Street, or what Main Street has over really kind of digital online shopping, is just the face-to-face experiences. When you start to really kind of look at the data, it shows that 74% of Americans prefer experiences over things and stuff. Now, I haven't seen really what that statistic is now, but, I'm going to have a feeling that when we get out or like really kind of post-COVID, that's going to probably be even a higher number and percentage of people, just because I think that's what we're missing out on right now is just the face-to-face. I think Zoom and all of these digital tools are awesome in terms of how they can bring us together digitally. But, Main Street still has this advantage where it's just nothing will really replace the face-to-face. So things that, like examples of businesses in the experience economy that I love is Meow Wolf. So Meow Wolf is they call it like it's where a haunted house meets like an amusement park, meets an art exhibit. And essentially it's all based off of experiences. And so you kind of go into this art exhibit that has this storyline, and you're able to explore all of these different worlds. I think they call it the multiverse. And there's portals that you can go through that really kind of allow you to enter these different worlds. So one of them, I won't give them all away, but just to, so you can wrap your head around it, is you're able to go through a fireplace in this living room. And when you go through the fireplace, it brings you into this totally alternate reality. So I think examples like that, when you kind of think about experiences as something that you can't necessarily replicate online, I think those were the type of models that I was really interested in and were really starting to show great potential pre-COVID.
That's great. Kathy and Brian is someone who really explores the edges. So it's really fantastic. And if you ever catch Brian Corrigan about other theories about the future of Main Street, they tend to be as far out and as potentially successful as things like Meow Wolf. And for those that don't know, we do have a Meow Wolf under construction in Denver, Colorado right now. So we can certainly use that as a space to explore lots of new angles. Kathy, what would you add to that? What have you seen in your work?
Well, some of the, Main Streets have gone through all sorts of phases in attempting things that they think will work for downtown. When strip centers and shopping malls opened up, we covered all our historic buildings in vinyl and aluminum to make them look like they're modern and strip center-like. And then all that came down and we exposed our beautiful historic buildings again. And then, another phase was creating pedestrian malls. And so, even one-way streets, so one of the trends that started several years ago was the ripping out of these one-way streets, which are just terrible for business. I've worked in communities that once they took out their one-way streets, they saw business increase by at least 30%. For those, because you just don't want to go around the block again. But a new one, not so new, but one that we always believed in, which is downtown belongs and should belong to the pedestrian. It should not be our, mission to get cars through our downtowns as fast as they can. And unfortunately, a lot of our main streets are highways. And so we have to work with our DOTs and trying to stop them from doing that. But I witnessed firsthand here, Concord, New Hampshire. I live in New Hampshire, and their Main Street was 4 lanes wide with diagonal parking on both sides. And they did a great street diet. It's now 2 lanes. And diagonal parking is gone on one side. It's parallel on one side, diagonal on the other. Retailers were not happy to lose some of that diagonal parking. But now the sidewalks are about 15, 20 feet wide. It's much shorter distance for pedestrians to cross over safely. And the whole downtown has shifted from being traffic oriented to be pedestrian oriented. That has played well for the whole COVID experience, with now every restaurant has plenty of room to bring tables out onto the streets. Merchants can bring merchandise out onto the streets. And it was a big project, and it was very controversial because people couldn't understand, how do you take 4 lanes of traffic and take it down to 2, because all 4 lanes were always busy. Well, there were a lot of sightseers who were just breezing through the downtown. And now it has made such a huge, huge difference for their downtown and just the feel and the mood of that. So it's nice to see whatever they can, even when you're on a state highway, that we are doing things that bring it more down to the pedestrian level, that, we have 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, and just, make the car the second. Or, one of the big issues with that was when they took it down to just 2 lanes, they worried about all the delivery vehicles. But in the very center of the street, I'm going to say it's a strip, maybe about 4 or 5 feet wide, that is just brick. And the vehicles just pull into the middle of the street, the UPS and any delivery vehicles. So they still have a means to park and unload in the downtown. But yeah, it's a street diet. We got to slow cars down.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And definitely in the spirit of Neum Turt's here today, a street diet. And we can imagine, as we look forward in this conversation, how much the adjustments to open air service and access on Main Street could sort of be evolving street diets across the country. So Phil, what do you have to add on that piece?
Well, I appreciate the invitation and to speak with you all. I was, fascinated by this conversation so far. So thank you so much, Kathy and Brian and you, Delaney. I was, I guess, wanting to talk about something you raised, Delaney, which was this intersection of business and purpose. And that's something I've been engaged in, that intersection, for quite a long time as a participant in the impact investing space. And impact investing or sustainable investing or responsible investing, it's gone by these different names over the years, has always been about trying to figure out how to bridge a little closer connection between the way people invest and what they actually care about or would like to promote in the world. Some very natural players, of course, for this are community foundations. And really any kind of foundation endowment is a natural sort of participant to align their investment portfolio or approach with their mission. But there's been a real disconnect with that over the years in the past, because many people who are deeply steeped in the finance world will tell you, no, you need to globalize your investments. You need to, buy emerging markets fixed income, and you need to buy commodities that are sourced out of Singapore or whatever. It's, there's those, that's the way these portfolios have been managed to the great detriment of purpose. And anyone who's ever worked in a foundation will tell you that the program people who are tasked with carrying out the mission of the organization have like no connection at all with the investment people who are managing the endowment of the portfolio. So here's a portfolio with some percentage of it going out into the, especially for community foundations, some very small percentage, 5% sometimes or so, going into the community, and 95% of it being invested in such a way that has no relationship whatsoever with the purpose of the organization. And over, I would say, the past decades, slowly but surely realization has come along to people that they do not need to invest in this disconnected manner. I would say that the COVID situation has really, as President Obama said the other day, for anyone who saw his graduation speech thing, he noted that COVID has just ripped a Band-Aid off so many perceptions that people walk around with currently that are just not correct. They're just, there's a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of misunderstanding about how finance relates to community and how people, can understand the sort of systemic risks that are going on that COVID has really exposed in a way, unfortunately. Yeah. But the silver lining might be that people can be more thoughtful. And one of the things that I've always tried to help people think about when it comes to impact investing is visualizing sort of a traditional, investment graph, if you will, like a risk and return chart. That's the way people always think, greater return, greater risk, that's the trade-off. But it's actually a three-dimensional chart that includes impact, and the impact of your communities, the impact of your, of addressing inequalities around the entire social construct of our system. So I'll try to be super quick because I know you need to move on, but I would say the point I was going to make to you is that, so New York just launched this forward loan fund the other day, last week, and it was oversubscribed in a matter of like a day. And they raised over $100 million from private investors to invest in a way that will support communities in ways that the other government programs didn't reach. And we think that this is a model for a national approach. And you mentioned I'm on the board of Calvert Impact Capital, and I'm excited that Calvert will be hopefully they were the lead aggregator for this New York fund, and will be spearheading a similar effort nationwide, where people can be a lot more thoughtful about targeting their investments into their local communities, most likely through CDFIs, which I agree with you again, Delaney. It goes back to that sort of trust factor, or I guess what you said, Kathy, about the way that local people interacted with each other in a different manner than it's just, some giant corporate, face that you walk into the building and, you're dealing with this global corporate institution, as opposed to, someone who's a part of the community who you'll see over the weekend or you'll see at night at the, local restaurant or whatever. So it's the same way with finance if people are thoughtful about it.
Well, and you and Kathy both, this conversation's, organically evolving into one direction we wanted to go was looking at the dimension of Main Street, but then also some of how we think of it in terms of risk, right? That we think of it as this really built permanent environment. And when we look at it as well, Main Streets are populated by businesses, by creatives, but they're by businesses and creatives, but they're managed by local governments, or in some cases managing districts, which are of course then linked to the local government. And this creates an opportunity for those public, private, and or nonprofit partnerships that we're all pointing to, but it also, in some of my thinking over the last couple of years, points to kind of a behavioral dilemma, and where we champion creatives and entrepreneurs for taking risks and failing. We don't do the same for our local governments and managing districts. We also know that historically, some of when we think about, as you kind of point to, Phil, like there's a lot of things that play a key role in innovation, and big government has actually played a key role in innovation. So it's not that government doesn't play a role in innovation, but then when we get down to the local level in something like our built environment, what can we do to catalyze and support those same risk behaviors within our more bureaucratic or local structures? And Kathy, I'd be curious what your perspective is on that to kick it off.
Yeah, when I got your list of things for us to consider for this call, that was the question. I thought, okay, where are my creative government entities out there? And again, it kind of comes back to this Concord example with their streetscape, because that came from the city. It wasn't that the merchants necessarily were asking for it, but the city, I want to say, educated itself, right? So, and I know Colorado recently did a best practices tour with the Wyoming Main Street people, where they invited local government leaders, elected officials, et cetera, to sort of join in going to communities in Colorado, but also up in Wyoming, and sort of sharing what some of those initiatives might be that they're undertaking, whether it is new incentives. It used to be we all had facade grant programs to inspire people to make small investments, and the public sector always contributed, not always, often, it was funded through the public sector. And then we could show them that reinvestment ratio, right? So I work in Tennessee, and in Tennessee, they offer $15,000 grants to communities who come into the Main Street program, and then they can lend it out to people. And I was in Smithville, Tennessee, that they granted like 15, 20 people $500 grants with that, and it generated $250,000 in private sector reinvestment just from that $15,000. So that if we're good at measuring sort of when they do give us money, either to take risk on encouraging entrepreneurs to open, doing incubators in our downtowns, or spurring sort of our next generation of business development, we have to show that leverage in what's the job creation, what's the private sector investing in it.
Yeah, that's a really great thing that you do to zoom in there, because I do love what Phil pointed to, that, with New York's Forward Fund, the kind of work that does, and that can seem really big and out of reach for a small community, but everything at scale. And so what does a Forward Fund look like for a rural community, and how far can $15,000 go? As we kind of start to zoom in, I want to pass the mic to you, Brian. Brian, can you give me one line in 30 seconds around how you see the pandemic opening the door to lasting change on Main Street?
Well, I think for me, it's really like what we're starting to see is we're seeing that the activity is being spilt out onto the street. And to me, that's what makes Main Street so great. And that's where the idea of really kind of bringing in artists and designers into helping you think about how you design that vibrancy on Main Street. To me, that's what I hope the doors are opening to, and that we really, again, kind of think about, not so much having all the vibrancy be inside of the buildings, but be outside of the buildings. And hopefully that will be here to stay.
That's fantastic. And, as we look at this, and then how do we give ourselves the permission that we're given today out of necessity in the way that we're adjusting our behaviors and implementation on Main Street. I think it's just remembering that that is something we can all carry forward, and bringing together all those different components that make Main Street a rich experience. As we shift here into the local Zoom in, I would like to introduce Kate Gilbert, the Rural Prosperity Manager from the Colorado Resiliency Office in the Department of Local Affairs, and she hails to us from Crested Butte, Colorado. Welcome, Kate, and thank you to our panelists.
Hi, everybody. How are you? I am super excited to be here today. I want to start with how my office defines resilience, everybody's favorite buzzword right now, which is the ability of communities to adapt and thrive in the face of changing conditions. And never have we ever seen change on the scale that we are seeing right now. It is affecting our businesses. It is affecting the systems we rely on. It is showing where there might be fractures in what we've come to depend on. And I have been really inspired throughout the course of this event. People are bringing creativity to this challenge. We are showing our ability to respond to change quickly, try things, work together on a scale that we never have before. And I am most impressed by our Colorado community's abilities to do this and the movers and shakers on the ground who are trying new things every day. I have two of them with me here today. I have Scott Shine, who's the planning manager for the city of Durango, and I have Chris Matera, who is the director of the Basalt Chamber. These two are the ones who are working this on the ground, and that is a hard leading edge to be on, and they are doing such cool things. So I am going to kick us off with talking about this collaboration piece, the ways that we are working together now in our communities to enable some of this change in our main streets. I'm going to start with you, Scott, if you want to talk about how you're collaborating in Durango to bring some of this kind of creativity and change.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everybody. Like Kate said, I'm the planning manager for the city of Durango in the community development department, working on the ground, as she said, at a desk in my bedroom. So excited to think about how the things that we're doing over Zoom and tons of emails and webinars and things start to have an effect on our tangible physical community, and trying to always be making that connection in the work that we're doing. Thanks to the initial panelists on those thoughts. Wrote down some notes about, redefining our identity. That's a major thing for a town like Durango, has historic roots, and really values those things. Is a National Historic District on our main avenue. And when you talk about redefining that identity, as a tourism and recreation-based economy that is very vulnerable to things like a global pandemic and other economic downturns, that's really what we're having to do at this point. It's a scary thing for people. And so trying to navigate those emotions and those passions and bring them together to positively affect our community is really what we're focused on right now. I love the discussion about championing risk in local government, and would love to think more about that. How do we catalyze risk-taking among public sector officials? And I think we'll get to a question later in the panel about the major barriers to some of these ideas. And I think that's really at the heart of it, is nurturing that mentality. So in order to really be effective in response to this current crisis, our community has formed, and I've been co-chair of a local economic recovery task force. I'm sure all of your communities have something similar, pulled together with economic development organizations, nonprofits, business owners, and local government reps, both city and county. And that has been a bright light in the midst of the hard times. We're really realizing that we can't sort of stay entrenched in our own sort of turf battles, that when times were easy and when things were humming along pretty well and resources were abundant, it's easy to fall into that mindset and defend your own turf and get a little apathetic about how we're interconnected in our community. And this task force has really responded well to this crisis. They jumped on it really quickly, and the initial focus was just sort of reacting and responding. We focused a lot on the federal stimulus bills and trying to get information out to local business owners so that they could take advantage of those programs, the payroll protection program and other opportunities. And as a result of sort of the quick action, the initial numbers show that La Plata County received a higher level of those federal funds per capita than other communities across the country. So we're really proud about that, and have been saying, you know, in spite of the problems with PPP and some of the other federal programs, our focus was on getting those resources to the people who needed them in our community. So now, out of that response, react mentality, we're very clearly pivoting to long-term recovery, and the group has really embraced this idea of reimagination. And we just had a 2.5 hour long study session with our council yesterday, talking about these big, ambitious projects that you know, don't stop once, now that restaurants are open in Colorado, or some of these triggers are met. We don't want to stop meeting and taking advantage of this momentum that's created, and the effectiveness that we've been able to have as a group. So we're starting to pivot, think about that reimagination, and really keeping the community well-being at the heart of what we're doing, and not letting, as much as we can, not letting politics, personal sort of agendas or organizational agendas get in the way of this work of this task force. And I think, like Kate mentioned right at the start, it's been inspiring. It's been energizing to be a part of it. It's what helps me keep going, and it's really been a fun group to be a part of. So I'll talk more about some of the initiatives that came out of that group in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to pass this to Chris for the same question, which is how kind of coordination and collaboration is happening in Basalt and across your region.
So coordination and collaboration is necessary in our area, particularly with Basalt. For those of you who aren't familiar, and it's kind of a nuanced thing, we actually are in 2 different counties. So with the different variances and public health orders going into effect, it's led to a lot of confusion as to literally what one business can do on one side of the street versus another. So you've seen a greater effort between local government, nonprofits like the chamber, as well as the private sector coming to the table and realizing that we need to work together to solve these problems. We had a wildfire 2 years ago, and a lot of that crisis helped lay the foundation for what we're really relying on now. It's just we've pivoted to much more of a public health portion of it, that we didn't have them as involved, swapped out firefighters for public health experts on this one. But in terms of that collaboration, it really comes down to, we want our community to survive. When it came to those kind of triage moments and we're just trying to stop the hemorrhaging, it's all hands on deck. Somebody phrased it really well earlier in this crisis, and it was, we're all in this together. We might be in different boats. Some of us have a dinghy, some of us have a yacht, but we're all in this together. And with that, it has allowed us to hyper focus on that response. And I think, as in our area, we're doing ski terminology, we're in Blue Square, we're phase 2, that we've gotten a chance to kind of breathe, step back, regroup. Things are a little less immediate, changing every 15 minutes. But it's turned into this need to collaborate, and then a desire that I hope will be that silver lining post-COVID, where we just continue to work together. We had, about 2 years ago, try to set up a framework to discuss the economic development and growth of the Roaring Fork Valley. And again, multiple municipalities, a lot of unincorporated space, so development becomes a challenge, and then 3 different counties. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on that one. But this is allowing us to reboot that discussion of, essentially, who do we want to be when we grow up? It's taken us back to that core of, what does this community look like 3 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now? And it's been really great, because I think, I serve on sort of 3 different task force. I'm in the group that Kate runs, which is, I think all of us agree, is a huge source of inspiration and creativity. And the best part of that group is similar to our task forces locally, is that there's not all one set of people. It's not all local government or all chambers or all private businesses. It's kind of this hodgepodge jambalaya that's happening that allows for this creative expression, ideas, growth. And, as we've learned, it just throws something out there because we've never been through this before. So we can get a little crazy. And I think everyone's a little bit more accepting of failure. Or somebody put it, I'm learning, not failing. And I love that quote. And I think at this point we are learning a lot and very quickly. And, you've seen both at the local level and at state level, especially, how quickly we can pivot. So I think you are seeing government adopt more of that entrepreneurial, constant iteration 2.0, 3.0 as we're getting through this, because it's like, okay, that didn't work, or that worked for a week, and now we're on to the next phase. What are we going to do, 2 weeks from now? So I think by doing coordinated support and collaboration, it's just made us a lot stronger. And again, I hope this is something that we continue on once we can all breathe a little bit.
Chris always comes up with all my taglines and phrases that I want to start using going forward, which I now think that just get a little crazy should be the words that we all live by. And I just to quickly add, I do think this is part of what the Resilience Office has been trying to build in communities, is this kind of quick response, and state government's learning to do it too. And we are learning to partner directly with communities. And we have done that in the Department of Local Affairs for years. We have a team of regional managers that really enables that, but we are learning alongside everybody right now, right? Because none of us have the answer. And I think that is kind of the fantastic part of this, is our ability to learn together is really valuable. So speaking of all the things that we are learning together, let's dive in to some of the specifics, some of the things that you all are trying in your communities right now. For example, I know, Scott, that Durango has an emergency order around on-site parking and moving dining out into those spaces. Do you want to expand on that and anything else that you are trying?
Yeah, thank you. So as some of the previous speakers mentioned, there's a big push to create more outdoor space for business operations, especially eating and transactions. And we're looking at a bigger picture way to do that with reconfiguring our main avenue. But as we were starting to go down that path and realizing how complex that's going to be, even a temporary sort of reclamation of sidewalk and parking spaces, we thought about, well, hey, there's all this private parking on these lots that is not in as high of demand right now. Why don't we just really quickly, under our emergency order, allow businesses to spill out and use that space? No additional review, which they typically would have to go through, no additional permitting. Just you can use up to 25% of your off-street spaces for those purposes. So we did that in early May. And I think, to be honest, some of it was happening already, and we just kind of said, yeah, okay, you're able to do that. But that was a pretty small thing. It was like a 1.5-page order from our city manager. Took an hour and a half to write, and we got it done. And so from there, that sort of built some confidence and some capacity for embracing some uncertainty and allowing some quick and nimble solutions. So we also did one about temporary signage, especially when more non-essential businesses were closed down. We gave them some more banner square footage. Again, without permitting, without additional review, they just had a right to do some more temporary signage to make sure the community knew they were open. A local print shop gave away, I think, over 150 free like 3x6 banners promoting the businesses that were open. So that was a good partnership. And again, like I said, during that sort of react and response mode, we did a lot of webinars with the local community, especially about federal stimulus programs. And those simple things, like I said, are building. And now we're moving into some bigger, more ambitious ideas. A group is preparing a variance request for some key sectors of our local economy. I know a lot of counties have done that already, but if you know Durango, the Durango to Silverton narrow gauge train is a big part of our economy, and there's not really any clear guidance about when they could open, how they could operate. So our task force group has been working with the train ownership to come up with a detailed specific plan for that key part of our economy. And we're hoping to file that variance the end of this week. And again, I don't think the right players would have been coming together without this venue of our economic recovery task force. The other sort of bigger picture thing that I mentioned is really reclaiming parking spaces and vehicle lanes on Main Avenue, and doing that in sort of a quick, light way. There are a lot of complexities around that we're working through, but we're hoping in the next week or two to allow businesses to spill over into the parallel parking spaces. And our downtown, our Main Avenue is 2 lanes each way right now, and we're going to narrow it down to 1 lane each way with a combination of planters and some other traffic control devices. And that we'll see. We're sort of couching that as a trial period for maybe a longer term redesign of Main Avenue, similar to what Kathy was talking about reclaiming the space for pedestrians. So we'll see how that goes. There is some contentiousness around it, but overall there's broad-based community support. Our council's behind it. So we're excited to get that started. When you think about Main Avenue or Main Street more as an idea than a place, what some of the initial panelists were talking about, some of the things we're thinking about from a public sector perspective is broadening the types of uses that are allowed on our Main Street, not just seeing it sort of t-shirt shops and a retail restaurant destination, but allowing some artisan and some craft scale manufacturing. If there are some more empty storefronts because of this crisis, how can we make it easy for new businesses to go in there and allow a wider range of more resilient businesses to take that space up? So that's sort of a regulatory modification we're thinking about. 2 other things real quick. We have a Creative Economy Commission that is really trying to embrace this current period and try to switch from the model. They were a public art commission, and they used to just focus on sort of your traditional model of public art. They've moved into the creative economy mindset, and now they're taking that more into the placemaking, participatory, interactive type of public art. So we're thinking about launching an art brigade to do some more kind of guerrilla art and focus that around a recovery theme. How do we recover together, and getting that message out through public art, through sort of quick pop-up installations. And that's really exciting to think about. We also recently formed an urban renewal authority, which doesn't sound that innovative and may scare some of the downtown advocates on the call, but urban renewal authorities in Colorado can be really tailored to a community's desires and goals and character. And so we plan to use that for everything from small scale facade improvements, employ it in historic preservation, and then also look at sort of your bigger, more traditional redevelopments in the future. So I would like to thank Downtown Colorado Inc. for their help, especially with that initiative. And for the people on this call, they also have some webinars and a lot of good educational materials about this idea of how do we keep that great concept and idea of Main Street, central business districts as places and gathering places, but also expand it and adapt with the times. They have a really innovative mindset and bring in a lot of great speakers to Colorado about placemaking and downtown revitalization. And they helped us a lot with our Urban Renewal Authority. So we're excited to get that going and helping as part of this recovery effort.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, last question, and we're going to move this over to Q&A, but I want to ask Chris one more thing, kind of building on some of what Scott began to talk about, which is what are some of the things that we're trying that might be opportunities to accelerate our communities into the future, things we've wanted to do maybe in the past that are going to help us come out of this even maybe better than before?
I think a lot of what you've been hearing on this call is this, freedom to experiment. And, to Scott's point, we have been talking about redoing, part of Midland Ave, which is one of our main streets, and it hasn't really happened. But this summer is going to be a huge experiment as to what if we take away some parking? What if we do more outdoor seating? What if we have wider sidewalks? And I think it's just this way to be that sort of beta test for us and see if it sticks in a way that, again, people are a little bit more forgiving right now. And it's funny because we've done a lot of looking ahead, but in my position, I've actually looked a lot into the past. I love how like drive-in theaters are coming back and cruise nights and all these things that I was like, okay, what else happened in the 50s that we need to steal? And, I can totally understand Kathy's frame of reference being up in New Hampshire. I'm originally from Connecticut. My hometown's from 1630. And you look at the importance of like the town green and that gathering space in that center. And how do you build community through experience and space and not so much, I'm sitting here on my little device and, head down and not connecting with people. I love what Brian said about experiences are going to be so much more important moving forward because that's what I miss. That's what I'm personally craving. And so where's our ability to create experiences within our downtown and, from a tourism perspective, that experience as marketing and looking at even low hanging fruits of, you can tell when it's lunchtime in downtown Basalt based on the sheer amount of Lycra and spandex because everyone cycles down here for lunch. This is a great opportunity to like take a parking spot and turn it into a bike rack. And maybe that sticks next summer and we can play with that. So I think it's a lot of getting creative and not being limited by how we used to think about things. Or I could easily see a huge uptick in the number of food trucks because if I'm a restaurant who can't keep the revenue and pay the rent the way I used to, a food truck's a lower barrier to entry, a lower cost to run, or if I'm a new business and I want to try that, that's available, but we just need to make sure we have the zoning in place so that they can park where they need to park. And it shouldn't be brick and mortar versus other business because they're both local businesses and we want to support everyone. And I think we're being challenged in a way to get creative. We traditionally have a summer concert series that draws anywhere between 250 to 850 people, depending on who's playing. And we're looking to reinforce not just Main Street, but all of town and looking at kind of that dispersed, messy vitality and wanting to be playful with it. So, taking it so you could ride around town with your kids in the car or get on your bikes and cruise around town that way and go to these different pop-ups and encourage everyone like, okay, this is gonna be the one night we come out and do this. And, for me, it's a lot of our stores, I look at it and they've done so well over the years. But we're in a weird spot now with working remotely or different hours that if your store's only open from 10 to 5, I can't shop there. But if we have that late night that I know I can go, I'm putting that in my calendar and I'm going to show up and spend my money in my local town. So I think moving forward, we can experiment and then see what can inform what comes next, what's our new future. And then don't be limited by how we always used to do it, because if we had that thought process, we wouldn't have gotten to the moon. We wouldn't be doing the crazy space launch we're doing today. Like, we're building something new. The rules don't apply.
That was all very well put. Everything's a pilot right now. It should continue to be. That should be our mindset even outside of this event. And Chris and I have already agreed that when all this is over, we're having a big statewide party where we all go and gather in our local brewery and celebrate when it's all over. Okay, I am going to hand this over to Erin, and then I think we're going to go to Q&A.
Thank you so much. I'm feeling so inspired by this conversation that we just made the executive decision to go a couple minutes over on time so that we can ask some of these golden questions as I see them. So I'm going to kick the first question to Brian, who I'm hoping can come back online. Brian, the question in the chat is, do you have any creative suggestions for how we might need to adapt Main Street experiences for the new physical distancing and people density limits COVID-19 presents, kind of above and beyond the outdoor dining and some of the things that we've discussed very briefly on the call already?
Yeah, well, this is really the perfect opportunity, I think, to again bring in the artists and the creatives and the designers and the people with just the out of the box ideas, because as we've all been talking about, this is the time to experiment. So I can't stress enough to just really think of this as an opportunity to think about like who in your community is on the edges, right? The people that normally their ideas don't fit into the box, and bring them into the problem solving, because the people from the edges see things in such a different way, and that's exactly what's needed right now. So, and I think that kind of goes into this idea of just, how do we make sure that when we are building things that we're just not doing what everyone else is doing, and that it allows for the distinctiveness of place and that local flavor to really, again, be your own local flavor and not just someone else's. Another thing that we're trying here in Denver, so I reached out to a local restaurant here called Somebody People. They're a vegetable forward dining experience. And I think with, kind of post-COVID, it's not an either or, it's the and. Let's do this and this other thing. And so it's, what does dining inside of the restaurant look like, and dining outside of the restaurant, and what does takeout look like as well? So we've started to really think about how do we reimagine the takeout experience, and think about how do we create these experiences for the home. So I've been working with 9 different artists, plus our culinary partner, Somebody People, to come up with what we're calling a farm to spaceship dinner, where our secret ingredient is water sourced from a subglacial lake on Mars. And the whole kind of premise of this takeout is that there's this narrative that you experience at your home. It's going to be on a screen for this first one, but it also plays along with really the dining experience and the takeout food that Somebody People has put together. Plus, we also have physical objects that are also characters within this experience. One thing that I want to say about the experience economy really quick is just the experience economy is the monetization of stories, and stories are really rooted in emotion. And I think this is the opportunity to really kind of think about, how do we really kind of bring stories, into the local business? How do we bring stories, out onto Main Street? And then if you can't do those two, how do we bring those stories into people's homes? And that's like, I think, a very exciting space. And so I think as it relates really to any sort of town, as I'm thinking about this new kind of farm to spaceship model, is that, as a model, you can go ahead and kind of think about like this idea of how you tell your local community story in those 3 different places. But I think it also gets into this idea of kind of the next step of beyond kind of like what we say digital tourism now, of looking at Google Maps and kind of doing a tour of the street. This is like, how do you bring your Main Street experience into people's homes? And again, it's never going to be as good as the face-to-face, but it can be a lot better than just touring the street on Google Maps. There's a lot of room for innovation there. And this is also something that we're exploring with downtown Colorado, to think about, how can we start working with communities to really kind of, again, do these blended experiences where you do have digital and physical pieces and components that really start to make kind of in-home experiences a lot more fun.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I know some people have to jump off the call, so I just want to highlight that this is being recorded and will be available on the Northwest SBDC website, on the Telluride Foundation website and the Choose Colorado YouTube channel. So we'll flash those links at the end, but if you have to jump off, you can come back and fast forward and hear our final question and our wrap up. Really fantastic conversation. So last question I'm going to send to Kathy if she's still available. And Kathy, the question is, what progress has been made on getting more businesses selling online? And I was given a statistic that I bet you'll share as a part of your response.
Yeah, right. When we did a survey of small businesses several weeks ago, about 6,000 businesses across the country responded, and only about 36% of all businesses had some way to sell online, which that's about all that anybody has been doing. And I think that's going to be a change for the future as well. And one of the greatest services that businesses were looking for in when we asked them what they needed to help get them through COVID. Well, number one, they wanted free money, grants versus loans. But then the very next thing was they needed assistance with getting involved in e-commerce. And it's not a simple, here, everybody buy this program, it's going to work for you, because every small business is different. But they're looking to Main Street programs or any kind of district management entity to provide that training. So I'm seeing a lot more training in that area, but also in states where they have business specialists. Some of our statewide Main Street programs have those people on the ground. They're working with SBDCs. They're working with anybody who can give that one-on-one assistance to businesses to figure out what's the best platform. Is it going to be from a website? Should I just be selling off of Instagram or Facebook? Or in the case of artists and creatives, I went to Etsy to buy my face masks because I want to support local. I don't want to go to the drugstore and buy face masks. So I think that's going to be a real big role that we can play with teaching people how to get online. Some other adjustments with, last year was the first year we started eating out more than we bought groceries. That obviously has changed. We're going to have some big impacts with restaurants as well, but we see that as an opportunity for some small scale production. Maybe some vacant restaurants or some restaurants that have cut back their hours might allow small manufacturers to come in and do things like fix their jams and jellies so they can sell them at the farmer's market. And then we have to just figure out what's the best selling for everybody. Like I said, it's not a one size fits all. We have to have the boots on the ground to help these businesses. But I think that's going to be a permanent thing, is that, I never before ordered from my hardware store online. But I have recently, and I just pulled up and they threw it in my car without me having to get out of my car. People are going to get used to that. So we have to figure out how our businesses can do that as well.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And I appreciate one thing that you mentioned. For those of you on the call who don't know me, I'm Erin McCuskey. I'm the director for the Northwest SBDC. And so I can echo that point that the SBDC has free consulting to help with some of that strategy to get your business online or to look at other types of marketing strategy. And it would be our privilege to assist you with that. So thank you so much. We're going to wrap up, and I wish we could keep this conversation going, because I personally find it so inspiring to hear that, as Kathy mentioned at the beginning of the call, Main Street is the heart and soul of our community, and it has a history, but so fun, for lack of a better word, to think about how it can actually be a part of this economic recovery. It's not just doomsday. There is great opportunity and great partnership that's happening to help pivot Main Street and make sure that it's vital to our future. I also really appreciate Brian's stat at the beginning that 74% of Americans prefer experiences over transactions. And I think people are going to latch on to that statistic. It's a great one. So on the screen right now, you heard shout outs for both of these organizations throughout the call. But if you're looking for the information for Downtown Colorado Inc. or the DOLA Main Street program, you can find more information there. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the call is being recorded. There's actually another call happening with our partners on the Eastern Slope, a different panel of national leaders, although Kathy will be a part of that panel as well, plus some local leaders. So if you're inspired by this conversation, I will include those recordings on our websites as well. So you can find the recordings and the slides at the Telluride Foundation's website, at the Northwest SCDC, and on the Choose Colorado YouTube channel. Also check out the Colorado SCDC that's in your region for resources specific to your business, and lots of great information on the Startup Colorado website. Next slide. There's the Choose Colorado YouTube channel, and our next call, we'll go to the last slide. Our next call is, since we're moving this to every other week, will be on Wednesday, June 10th. We'll have the Western Slope call at 1 p.m., the Eastern call at 3 p.m. We're still nailing down specifics for what that conversation is going to be, but I think today has highlighted, by all of us coming together and leveraging these partnerships, we're going to have a very robust conversation, and we're excited to continue these conversations into the future. You can also remember to check out the Startup Colorado podcast, which has a lot of these similar topics fitting out into small sound bites of 10 minutes or less. Lots of great information. So we'll wrap up there. Please send out this recording widely to your communities so that they can benefit, but we'll see you on June 10th.